Let's talk student-led composition.
You're listening to That Music Podcast with Bryson Tarbett, the curriculum designer and educational consultant behind That Music Teacher and the Elementary Music Summit. Each week, Bryson and his guests will dive into the reality of being an elementary music teacher and how music can truly be transformative in the lives of the students you serve. Show notes and resources mentioned in this episode can be found at thatmusicteacher.com.
Welcome back to That Music Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about student-led composition, and I'm going to essentially take you through the process that I just went through with my second graders, through a process that involved me giving a lot of the control back over to the students, which is a really cool experiment because that's definitely something that I want to do more of, I think it worked out pretty well. It was really kind of cool. It didn't go perfectly, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but I wanted to give kind of take this as like how I did that episode. So I have been really struggling with my second graders, not really struggling, but like I want to give them more. I want to wanted to give them a little bit more ownership, a little bit more buy-in, and a little bit more opportunity to be creative. So that's where we ended up in this composition activity, where I really wanted them to be able to create their own music in a really simple way. So when I was at the OMEA conference this year, I ended up buying the Purposeful Pathways book, which is great. If you haven't looked at it, it's been really helpful in my classroom the last couple, month or so. But one of the activities that they have in there is essentially taking doing some composition with apples. So a lot of different names of apples. So like we have Brayburn, Granny Smith, Red Delicious, basically breaking it up into the rhythms, tas and TGs essentially, and ta rest. And so that's kind of what we started with. We did Apple Tree. We actually did a song that was in the I believe the one that was in the Purposeful Pathways was Wind Up the Apple Tree, which is really cool. But we've been using Apple Tree for, I use it in kindergarten for Steady B, I use it in first grade for Ta and TT, and then I use it in second grade again for Do. So they've been pretty familiar with that. So we started with that just kind of as an easy way in, and then we had them create as a class a B section using different names of the apples. So on my interactive board, I had all the different cards written out, and they just dragged it into place, and we were able to clap it and speak it. And then we're able to bring it into instead of saying the words, say the tas, the teaches, the rest, all those fun things. Now, the next time they came in, I wanted to give that control back over to them. So instead of us doing it as a class, I had them find a group. I think there were groups of 2 or 3, depending on how the classes were broken up, and if there's an odd person out. But I said, all right, we are going to make our own compositions using these Apple cards today. And I essentially gave them 8 cards or multiple cards, but a blank spot that they needed to come up with 8. So I had the different cards. We had Bray, Burn, Ta, Granny Smith, TT Ta, Red Delicious, so on and so forth, right? So they had their different cards, and I said, all right, you and your group, you and your partner are going to come up with an order that has 8 of them. So the way that I did it, I was really super sloppy, but like I took a piece of paper, I drew 8 boxes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, kind of like 2 columns of boxes. And that was their paper. It was super simple. I did it with a Sharpie and then copied it. Then I had them take their cards and line it up in those boxes. So they chose what cards they wanted with the different apples, and they were able to put them in the box. We practiced a little bit. We kind of had them do their compositions. Some of them moved the cards around. Some of them traded out some cards. Some of them actually even traded with another group, which I think was kind of cool. They're like, hey, we want another one of these. You want to trade over here? I'm like, whatever, let it happen. So that's what we did first. Then I had them write down what was on their cards on their paper so that they could essentially save their work. So they wrote this stuff down. They wrote the words and the rhythms, which was really important. And then that was all we did for that class. So the next class rolls around, we pass out the papers again. So at this point, they have their papers with their 8 cards, with their 16 beats, with the rhythms, with the words, and with their names on it. That's pretty much all they have. Then I had them take 2 crayons from the middle, and I said, I don't care what colors you get, as long as they're 2 different color crayons. And I said, all right, I need you to split the boxes. So some of them have the first color and some of them the second color, and you're just going to draw a box around it with that color. The only rule is they can't all be in the same thing. So don't just alternate. So some of them are going to have to be red in the left column, and some of them have to be red in the right column. And the same thing where, some have to be blue in the left column, some have to be blue in the right column, whatever. So it's not just going back and forth. So you might be figuring out where I'm going with this. I then use this as essentially player A and player B. So the person in the group, they had to know what was their part. So we actually got into a little bit of part reading off of this, which I think was kind of cool. So they were able to say, all right, the person one is going to be do all the red, person two is going to be do all the blue, and when we do it together, it'll be a full composition. So that was day two. Then the next day they come through and we did the same thing we did. So breaking it up into groups, breaking it up into person A, person B, and then we added in some instruments. So I took it a step further. Instead of just having everyone play it on the same instrument, we kind of did some experimenting with timbre. So I got out some rhythm sticks, I got out some hand drums, and I think I also got out a couple of tambourines, even though that was a little loud. But basically, we were saying, all right, instead of just assigning it to a person, we're going to assign this color to a different timbre. So now we have students that they composed it, they're reading the rhythms, they already wrote the rhythms, they're doing timbre, they're using instruments, and they're working together. So if you're keeping track at home, this is a lot of standards and a lot of stuff happening in one activity. And I only did this for maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes of class. And the way that we ended it was we essentially everybody got to perform. Let me rephrase. Everyone who wanted to perform was able to perform theirs in front of the class, but everybody did theirs at the same time. So I was able to look around and see everybody having theirs. And if you're watching the video podcast right now, you're going to see Kat, who is just clearly sad that I am not paying attention to her. So if you don't watch our podcast, head on over to YouTube so you can see Kat trying to get some attention from me. So what I loved about this assignment, and I don't like assignment, this activity, what I like about this activity is it was really simple. We took baby steps to get there, but it was something that the kids really hadn't done much of, because I will be the first one to raise my hand and say sometimes I struggle giving up that control, and I need to do better at that. Because what's really cool is these kids came up with really cool things, and some of them even took it a step further. Some of them were like, well, what if we played it a second time through, and this time instead of reading from the top to the bottom, we read from the bottom to the top? And I was like, yes, sure, let's do that. And some of them were not like that, and some of them were like, we're just going to do exactly what I was told, and that's okay too. I really like this because it was very student led. All I did was give them the building blocks essentially, and let them go to town. And it was really cool. It was really simple. And it was nice to be able to sequence it over a few lessons, so that it wasn't us just doing the whole thing all at once. Because let's be honest, if we did this for 40 minutes, like the kids would probably get bored of it. But because we were able to kind of add it in as our rhythmic work of the lesson, it was able to really fit in seamlessly into that sequence. So your challenge this week is to try something that lets the students take control back, whether that be doing exactly what I just did, or doing some variation of it, or something else that you have been wanting to do forever that maybe you saw at a conference and it's been sitting in your folder of shame ever since. Pull it out, dust it off, give it a shot, and see what happens. Because what's really cool is when we can give our students the tools and the structure and the setup to do really cool things, most of the time they show us really cool things. So give it a shot. Let us know how it goes. Send us a DM over at That Music Teacher, or an email, hello@thatmusicteacher.com. And if you enjoyed this week's episode, please do us a huge favor and review this episode wherever you're listening to. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what you like about it. Not only does this help me feel like I'm not just kind of screaming into the void here in my basement studio, but it also really helps us get in front of new educators so that they can get the content specific professional development that they need to be awesome music teacher rock stars just like you. I'm going to leave it there for today, but in case nobody's told you lately, thank you so much for making a difference in the lives of the students that you teach.